Hey folks, welcome to week 12. Thanks for coming back. Lot going on this part of the course. People are experiencing some new things that in some cases they're very excited about. So let me just jump right into what's going on. First of all, there were some comments regarding the pace of learning, the amount of new stuff that's being thrown at you right now. A student said, I think I'm starting to feel a bit overwhelmed with all the new things we've been learning because we're learning a lot so quickly. It feels like now we have a lot of tools at our disposal, but I don't really know what specific tool to use at the moment. So that's not uncommon. At this point in the course, you've learned JavaScript, you've learned how to create objects, and you've learned how to manage variables, and you've learned how to create control structures like, if-then statements and loops, and use each on an array and so forth, or for each, I should say. You've learned a lot about how it all works, and now you're learning about different pieces and how to fit them together. And so we do this at this level, sort of on purpose. You're not expected to master necessarily, these libraries, jQuery, and you'll be thrown, other things will be thrown at you shortly. But now that you have the basics, we're exposing you to all these things so you can kind of pick and choose and see what's out there. Because as time goes on, you'll find new things to use, and you'll have a way to think about how to understand them based on the fundamentals you've learned and then this exploration of a lot of different things. So, we're really focusing on learning how to recognize and use an API that comes from wherever the API comes from, like jQuery's API, for example. So that's normal at this stage. This is kind of a high-level overview of a whole bunch of stuff that goes from here to the end of the course. And some of that stuff you're going to connect with and find really exciting. And that's why we do it. Just a little bit about bookmarklets. A number of students had a similar comment here that was, these are so cool. This tool seems great to use. I just need to figure out what I'm going to make with it, right? You can make lots of neat little things with bookmarklets, and that's why we throw that into the course, because it's overlooked a lot. The fact that, in a URL, remember what makes this happen. Just like we have http:// we can do JavaScript : and then put code, and it executes. Right, that's basically the heart of what makes a bookmarklet a bookmarklet. Really cool stuff there, and you probably took a look at Groovy Color, which Mine wrote some years ago, which is a really awesome bookmarklet. So there's that. jQuery, there was a lot of excitement about jQuery. A number of people said, oh no, something else to learn. I just learned doing it the plain way, and now we're learning jQuery. But it is very powerful, and students seem to react to that positively. The devil and the angel on my shoulders kept saying things like, jQuery is so much better. You don't have to keep learning JS. And then, of course you have to keep learning JS. That's what jQuery is built on. Don't even get me started on Vue or React. My brain's not ready for new frameworks yet. And that's true. jQuery is JavaScript, right? And people can use jQuery without really understanding JavaScript, but that's not the better way to do it. Now that you really understand JavaScript, jQuery is easier, it makes more sense, and you understand better where it can help you and where it might not be providing that much help. So they're not incompatible, right? Understanding these two things is together is much more powerful than just sort of muddling around with jQuery and figuring it out just enough to get the thing working. Another student said this week, I found myself referencing the jQuery API documentation quite frequently. I'm loving how much simpler it is. One of the reasons we use it. jQuery is really cool, but I'm a little apprehensive because I don't think I've really mastered basic JavaScript syntax or common things without looking it up, and now I feel like in many cases I might not want to use it again. And finally, the jQuery material was challenging. It's like learning to speak a new language inside of another new language. Of course, APIs are like that, right? You're learning a new API, you're learning a new tool set. It exists within the framework of your old language, and they fit together in some way, and now you have the basis to understand how they fit together. Just a few thoughts about where jQuery can really help you. It reduces many common tasks to just a few steps, particularly DOM manipulation. If you're doing stuff with DOM manipulation, jQuery is just wonderful. It's great for Ajax, it's great for other things as well. But DOM manipulation is really the core of what made jQuery so addictive to people that are programming in JavaScript. It also takes care of most browser compatibility concerns. That's one of the biggest reasons to use it, so that you don't have to worry if the new version of Safari treats something differently than the old version of Firefox. jQuery generally takes care of all that for you. And that's very important. It's always been very important. There's times, there's more compatibility amongst the browsers now than there used to be. But even where there's not, you don't have to worry about it. And that's why we don't spend any time in the course focusing on Chrome versus Firefox versus Safaris and so forth, because ultimately out in the world, for those kinds of things, you're going to use a framework or a library, and you don't have to know. But it's helpful to know what it's doing so that you can use it more effectively. You know how jQuery works because you know what getting elements, get element by ID or query selector, all the different ways of getting elements on a page and the things you can do with them. If you're using toggle in jQuery, which shows and hides something alternately, now you know what's happening behind the scenes, and that's helpful. And it's not either or. You can combine libraries and plain JavaScript. You can use jQuery for certain things within a program and use plain JavaScript for other things. You can have jQuery coexist with Vue.js, which we will actually demonstrate as we go forward in the course. Think of it like a toolbox, right? jQuery is a bunch of tools in a toolbox, and if there's one of them that looks like it's really going to help you with something, you can just pull it out and use it. It's not a bad idea within a program if you're doing something a certain way. Could pick anything. If you're doing Ajax in your program, and sometimes you use jQuery, and sometimes you use XML HTTP requests, and sometimes you use fetch, the inconsistency is kind of weird. So you might want to focus on consistency. Figure out how you're going to use it, and then use it in that consistent way throughout is good etiquette. It's good hygiene. But you really can mix up these things and use these tools where they help you. So to that, jQuery Ajax, kind of the same. Most useful things, we're seeing how easy Ajax was using jQuery, and that's true. And a student saying, I wasn't aware of the done and fail methods. I always saw a different format, but this looks cleaner. So with fetch, we were using promises that have a then and a finally and so forth. And in jQuery, and they've changed this recently in the more recent version, you can see there is a jQuery XML HTTP request object, and it has the promises have methods like done, fail, always, and of course it has then, and it tells you a little more about how this has changed. They used to be called success, error, complete. Some of this has changed, but you can certainly see once you've been exposed to promises, you've seen fetch, you've seen other versions of jQuery, this is just a syntax difference in how they name them. And of course you really do have access to all that XML HTTP request stuff underneath, like the ready state and so forth, but you don't need it because they've kind of bundled all that up in these chainable promise methods right here. So homework 4, this was the one where you had to split the text into separate spans for each word and apply some hover effect so that you can mouse over and get a hover effect. And a student pointed out, and more than one student pointed this out, the event-based solution for doing the hover effect. This student said, I found the following to be more elegant and efficient. And what's done here is just plain CSS, right? This is strictly a span with a pseudo class, a hover, attached to it, and then that makes when you hover over it, it highlights, in this case, in the color teal, and that's done with CSS. It's absolutely true that is, if that's all we were doing, that's a better way to do it. You don't need JavaScript to get a hover effect. The reason we asked you to do it with JavaScript, so this is fine. What this student said is great. This student actually did the solution using JavaScript and then popped this in here too and said, isn't this better? Which is perfectly appropriate. In homework number 6, we're going to be using a transcript like that, but we're going to be throwing the highlighting and using JavaScript where there's no mouse activity. It's going to highlight the transcript as the video plays, so that the transcript highlighting keeps track with what's being said in the video. So in this case, we asked you to do it with JavaScript so that you've seen that, you know how to do it, you're going to use it again as we go forward a couple of assignments in the course. So with that, we're on to week 12. I think I pointed out last week that there are 2 options, and you're welcome to do them both. Let me bump out to the module view here. Go down to week 12. And you can see there are 2 options here. We have one that uses jQuery plugins, right? So you can write custom plugins for jQuery that do things that you want them to do, and that's what we do in this unit. It's a fairly short one. but it does show how to create a jQuery plugin and the behaviors that make a plugin a good plugin, a well-designed plugin, and that's here in week 12. If you're interested in jQuery, this is fantastic. It's still valid. It's still usable. People do this all the time, and that's why that's there. Now, we added in more recently an option for week 12 that uses the Vue.js framework. Now, the Vue.js framework is like frameworks like Angular and React. It's basically a new way to build applications that use JavaScript with custom markup that connect JavaScript to the HTML in ways that you're going to find very, very interesting. If you're going to continue in the software development profession, either as a developer or a project manager or a product manager or whatever, understanding about frameworks is really critical. It's important because just about everything is built with them now. Canvas itself uses React as its framework, or they're moving to React, so parts of it are React and parts of it aren't. The reason we chose Vue here is because we thought it's sort of got the easiest learning curve to just show enough that you can get a sense of it without it being too much of a burden to have to go too deep in order to make things happen. So here are two options for going through the content. You can certainly go through them both, and we encourage that if you want to do that. There are practice sets for both. If you do both sets of practice sets, that will just count as extra credit. We will adjust that. I'll have to see how the grade columns are set up in Canvas, but we go back at the end and we adjust it so that anybody who does them both can get some extra credit points for having done them both. And then homework number 6, let me go into the assignments, also has two options. So homework number 6 deals with video in the page, and it deals with controlling video playback and synchronizing a video with a transcript. And we've created two different versions of this assignment. In terms of difficulty, they are equivalent. In terms of what you're building, what the thing does, they're identical. But one of them uses a jQuery plugin as the mechanism to make this happen, and one of them uses a Vue.js component, right? So there's two versions of that homework, and you can sort of pick the one that you'd like to do based on, in maybe what you enjoyed most in looking at the content in the course. So that is week 12. Homework number 6 we just talked about, and JW Player, I will say one thing. In week 13 we get into video, and we talk about using video with HTML5, and we talk about video using a library called JW Player. We use it so that you can get the hang of video and how to use video libraries, but also so that you can use another library. It's almost like jQuery for video to use JW Player. The thing that has just happened is JW Player, sometime between August and now, went through a bunch of revisions, and some of the lesson is not exactly up to date anymore. So what I would say is, if you're working ahead and getting to the video lesson, realize that I am going to change. I'm not going to unpublish it because some students are already looking at it, and it's not grossly incorrect. But some of the examples weren't working and such because they changed the licensing terms. I had to go in and fix it. So that stuff is mostly fixed, but the page still needs updating. So if you get as far as JW Player, I would say, sometime during this week that will be updated to be more current. And we just, you've seen it with JS Fiddle and other things. We rely on external things, and sometimes they change on us literally while the course is running. So there are some updates that are going to happen there. If you've already downloaded homework number 6, I would say download it again, because I updated that yesterday so that it is now compatible with the latest version of JW Player, and the licensing and so forth should be fixed in homework number 6. So go ahead and download homework number 6 now if you want to. If you've already downloaded it, you might want to download a new one. There's just a handful of changes in the JavaScript and the HTML. But they make it work, whereas the version that was up there stopped working with the player, that version that was embedded. So that's JW Player. That'll be updated within the next few days. And finally, the final project. I updated the due date in the syllabus. I guess the syllabus had one due date and the course has another. The correct due date is the 19th of December. That's a Thursday night. We can't take anything late. No homework 6 and final project. There can be no late days because we need those. We need to get them graded and get the grades into the school very, very quickly. Pardon my clock. That Thursday night, I am going to schedule this. I haven't gotten a room yet scheduled, but we will do a voluntary, totally optional, but a lot of fun final project presentation night. You can do that in person on campus, somewhere in Cambridge. It's usually at 1 Story Street, is where we get a room, right there in Harvard Square. Or you can do it with Zoom, because we use the Helix classroom, so you can Zoom right into the classroom, and it's a lot of fun to see what other people have done, and if you're willing, show the thing that you've done. There's great stuff that students come up with that correspond to things that interest them, and we see projects that that you just never would have thought of that somebody would go in and do in JavaScript in a web page. So with that, welcome to week 12 and week 12, and have a great week. I'll see you in the course.